What if I told you that your heartbreak, your grief, your loneliness, those moments you wish you could escape, are not obstacles to your growth, but the very ground of your awakening? What if pain is not a punishment, but an invitation? For centuries, we've been taught to run from suffering. But for the great mystic poet Rumi, suffering is not just necessary, it is sacred. It's the fire that burns away illusion, the wound through which the light enters. And in his eyes, pain is not a detour from the spiritual path. It is the path. Welcome to a different way of seeing sorrow. One that could transform not just how you experience hardship, but how you understand your soul. Welcome to the unfolding journey. Here, we explore the deeper layers of spiritual insight, poetic wisdom, and timeless teachings that nourish the soul. If you're drawn to inner growth, mystical thought, and a love for truth that transcends the surface, this space is for you. Subscribe and walk with us as we unfold the mysteries, one step at a time. Now, let's dive into today's reflection. The role of suffering in Rumi's concept of spiritual growth. To understand Rumi's view of suffering, we need to begin with the spiritual vision that shaped his poetry. Rumi was not simply a romantic or philosopher. He was a Sufi mystic, and for Sufis, the goal of life is union with the divine. But this union does not come cheaply. It requires the dismantling of the ego, the burning away of false identities, the unraveling of all that is not God. And how is this accomplished? Through suffering, through longing, through heartbreak. In one of his most famous lines, Rumi writes, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." This single sentence encapsulates his entire spiritual philosophy, that suffering is not meaningless. It is how we are cracked open so that divine light can pour in. Rumi uses powerful metaphors for suffering, fire, burning, melting, because they point to the transformative nature of pain. He writes, "Don't get lost in your pain. Know that one day your pain will become your cure." Pain, for Rumi, is not just something to survive. It is something that purifies. Like gold in the furnace, the soul is refined by fire. The fire hurts, but it reveals the hidden essence within. This perspective radically shifts how we see difficulty. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" Rumi invites us to ask, "What is this trying to teach me? What illusions is this burning away?" In Sufi thought, the ego, the false self, is the biggest veil between us and God. And suffering is one of the most effective ways to pierce that veil. One of the most distinct features of Rumi's spiritual poetry is longing, a kind of aching emptiness, a holy homesickness for the divine. This is no ordinary sadness. It is a fire in the chest that pushes the soul toward reunion with its source. Rumi writes, "I have been pierced by the arrow of longing. My heart bleeds, but it bleeds love." In his worldview, longing is not weakness. It's the soul remembering where it came from. This ache is not to be fixed or silenced. It is to be honored, because it draws you back to God. The pain of separation is what makes the union so sweet. The absence of the beloved, symbolizing God, is what intensifies the desire for presence. In Sufi tradition, this longing shock is often considered the most noble of spiritual states. So if you've ever felt a deep, unexplained yearning that nothing in the world seems to satisfy, Rumi would say, "Good. That longing is your compass. Follow it." Unlike modern ideas that often reduce suffering to random misfortune or psychological error, Rumi sees suffering as deeply purposeful. In his poetry, everything that causes us pain is orchestrated by the divine to awaken us. He says, "Try not to resist the changes that come your way. Instead, let life live through you." Pain, for Rumi, is how God teaches. It's how the soul grows. Sometimes, he suggests, God takes away what you love the most, not out of cruelty, but to make space for something higher, something eternal. This can sound harsh, especially when you're in the midst of suffering, but to Rumi, it's an act of supreme love. God breaks the heart, yes, but only so that the heart can expand. He writes, "You were born with wings, why prefer to crawl through life?" And perhaps suffering is what reminds us we have wings. In addition to fire, Rumi often uses the metaphor of water, particularly rivers and floods, to talk about pain and grief. Water, like grief, flows. It moves through us, often uncontrollably. But in that movement, something is washed clean. He writes, "When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other, doesn't make any sense. In the depth of sorrow, the mind's grip loosens. Language fails. Identity softens. It's in this wordless space, beyond the reach of intellect, that transformation happens." So grief, like water, may seem like a storm, but it leaves clarity in its wake. One of the reasons Rumi's teachings resonate so deeply is because he's not afraid to dwell in paradox. For him, divine love both wounds and heals, breaks and rebuilds. And we, as seekers, must be willing to live inside that tension. Rumi says, "Love is the whole thing. We are only pieces." Sometimes the suffering we experience is not from the absence of love, but from its intensity. Divine love, in its rawest form, overwhelms us. It shakes loose everything that is not essential. And that's painful, but also freeing. Love, for Rumi, is not just comfort. It's a sacred fire that demands surrender. No discussion of Rumi and suffering is complete without speaking of Shams of Tabriz, the wandering dervish whose presence shook Rumi's life to the core. When Shams appeared, he wasn't gentle. He disrupted Rumi's comfortable life, challenged his ideas, and ignited an inner fire that Rumi didn't even know he had. And then Shams vanished. Rumi was devastated. But out of that sorrow came a flood of poetry, thousands of verses burning with longing, beauty, and divine insight. His suffering became the seed of his genius. He might never have become the poet we know today without that heartbreak. As he writes, "Don't you know yet? It is your light that lights the world." But that light only appeared after darkness. Shams was the spiritual earthquake that cracked Rumi's soul open and made room for divine light. What Rumi ultimately offers us is not a way to avoid suffering, but a way to meet it, to lean into it, to allow it to be our teacher, our purification, our guide. Pain in Rumi's world is the invitation to go deeper, to drop the masks, to let go of what no longer serves, to return to the present moment, where the divine is already waiting. He says, "Be like a tree and let the dead leaves drop." This is not about passivity. It's about trust, trusting that even in sorrow, there is a hidden grace, that even in brokenness, there is beauty, that suffering is not the end of the story, but the beginning of a deeper one. We live in a world that often wants to fix pain immediately, to avoid it, to numb it. But Rumi offers a different path, a path of sacred endurance, inner listening, and radical trust in the process of life. If you're going through suffering, he doesn't tell you to escape it. He says, go deeper. Ask what it's trying to show you. Don't run. Open your hands. Let it change you. Your sorrow, your loneliness, your aching heart. These are not signs that you're far from God. They're signs that God is drawing you closer. In fact, Rumi would say, your wound is your invitation. Your pain is your path. To suffer is to be human, but to suffer with awareness, to let your pain teach you, purify you, awaken you. That is the beginning of transformation. As Rumi teaches, suffering is not meaningless. It's not punishment. It's the sacred fire that forges the soul.